Trump just recently announced a major investment in AI in the U.S. That's following up on major investments in chip manufacturing, as well as basically restricting China's access to cutting-edge processors, as well as Russia and a couple other bad players. So here we are, basically, having this kind of, Cold War fight with countries that are, trying to use our resources against us, and it's just kind of, it kind of smells a little bit like the COVID thing. Like, what? There's no here. There's no fire. It smells funny.
But I'm going to pardon you anyway for anything you may or may not have done or said for the last 10 years. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, and it's like, I think it's ludicrous to think that they've got AI going at a fraction of what everybody else has got price-wise going at. My belief is, I love tech. I'm not a big tech investor like you are. I don't know the companies as well. But I think that in order for you to have this kind of game-breaking collapse in all the other players, if we had quantum computing come to market really fast, that could do it. But at the same time, if you add processing power, it's just going to make AI more powerful, more prevalent. Why all of a sudden NVIDIA's going down? Every AI competitors out there has to buy more chips to get their AI to run.
Right.
Everybody needs chips, so every player that enters the market that wasn't there before means there's that much more demand for chips and power.
Well, no, you're totally right. And I think this notion, well, a couple things. So I kept thinking this morning about when the Chinese were hosting the Olympics, and President Obama talked about how they were smoking us on infrastructure. And now what we learn is that they were building infrastructure, buildings, apartment complexes that are still empty. So there's one thing about being quick and cheap, and there's another thing about being useful. And that's what I kept thinking about today. But I was on CNBC for the hour on Power Lunch, and Dan Ives joined us, and he pointed out Alexander Wang, who is he's the Scale AI CEO. There we are, happy campers. Scale AI CEO, and he was in Davos last week, and he said, my understanding is that DeepSeek has about 50,000 H1000 chips. Those are NVIDIA chips, which they can't talk about, obviously, because it is against the export controls, or the embargo, as we like to call it, that the U.S. has put in place. And it is true, they may have more chips than other people expect, but on a forward basis, they will be limited by the chips controls and export controls that we have in place, which would also be another reason to kind of jump in right now. And then you brought up this morning, and I'd love for you to comment on this. So we're banning TikTok, but we're going to let people download an AI app with all their... Right.
I mean, is your phone not spying on you enough? I mean, like, you're going to actually download your overlord right onto the phone? I mean, there is no cure for stupid. I mean, Nancy, thing that kind of gets me is this AI we're talking about, the deep learning, large learning models, they still have limited applications. Most people are using them to do their PowerPoint presentations. You know what I mean? Right. That's the vast majority of people out there.
IPO circulars, legal docs. Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I was reminded of a CIO survey. We're going to come to Daniel Bones in 1 minute. He said, I have not started to panic. Rather, I'm trying to be patient and buy well. We'll be right back to you, Daniel. I just want to finish this thought. But so we have the CIO survey, which is the Chief Information Officer at the Fortune 1000s, Fortune 500s. And they've come out and said, we think large language models are super important, to the tune of about 80% and above. Different question asked the same way a couple of times. But then when asked how much of your budget, or do you have a portion of your IT budget allocated to large language models, only 8% said yes. So that tells me we're not at peak spending, and that even a disruptive technology like potentially DeepSeek is going to be good for demand. I think that's all it's going to do, is drive demand. Yeah. So Daniel, go ahead.
Interesting, Nancy, if we're going back to whether or not this is much more of a disruptive thing from the standpoint of China using it to try to disrupt markets, and especially our tech exposure, which we've obviously dropped the gauntlet with the CHIP Act, as well as President Trump's focus on AI development here in the U.S. But it's really interesting that if you go back to the inauguration and you looked at who was in the audience, and I think one of the telling things for me was in the olden days would have been people like head of GE, like Jack Welch would have been there. You think about like the consummate, like large American companies,
bankers, yeah.
And yet, who was there?
Yeah,
all tech. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, was Zuckerberg. I mean, the guy. The guy. I can't remember the guy. Google's last name, but
Sundar Pichai. Well, and don't forget Lauren Sanchez, because she's a very important.
I didn't notice her there.
You didn't? Mark Zuckerberg did.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Mark Zuckerberg noticed her. Yeah, no,
that was tech.
Right. You're right. 100%.
So this is an attack on tech.
100%. Yeah. And so, but can we go back to Daniel for a second? Yeah. So thanks for your comment, Daniel. I think that what we saw today was a classic example of the algorithms selling the headlines, and then the hedge funds jumping in, because that's what they do. They invest for the next 2 to 3 days, sometimes 2 to 3 weeks, but they're not investing for the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. And that's emblematic of their total returns. That shows up, let me say it that way, in their total returns. Over the last 10 years, this is Alpha Hedge and another firm. I quote it in one of my commentaries. So if you want a copy, just go to our website, www.laffertengler.com, and ask for it to be sent to you. But what we'll tell you is that what was I going to say? Oh, the hedge funds have returned 8 to 10% annually over the last 10 years, and the S&P's up over 13. So that's a big difference on an annualized return. And then there were a number of articles in the Wall Street Journal in the last couple of weeks, like after fees, the returns have been abysmal. So they create the volatility that those of us long-term investors want to take advantage, or should take advantage of. I don't know that you jump into NVIDIA tomorrow or Broadcom, but I think you let it settle. And then you step in and say, did the Blackwell backlog, and that's the Blackwell chips, did it melt away? Are we hearing from companies on earnings that they're going to increase or at least maintain their CapEx budgets? That's all bullish for the group. And I think what you'll see is that the names will settle in and this will be one of those opportunities like 2022 where you go, oh, so I got Microsoft at $220 a share. Doesn't matter if it hasn't done anything for the last 3 months. It's had a nice total return over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, Arthur, I'm curious about the politics. I know you'll stay on top of that, but it seems suspicious.
Well, and Nancy, it's I know I do the macro bond side, but the headline risk, for those of you out there, headline risk is this, they come out headlines, no one actually sits back and thinks, do you really believe that this company cranked out a superior or a very competitive AI type product for $6 million? I mean, Nancy, my math's not very good, but aren't NVIDIA chips kind of expensive?
Yeah.
50,000 of them, you can get that in developer program for under $6 million.
Yeah, apparently.
But no one. There's no kind of like reality check on these silly headlines on this stuff.
Certainly not on the morning shows. Although I will say Bloomberg Surveillance kind of asked the question, but Squawk Box, they were kind of repeating it like it was a fact. And I mean, I think what we know. You're welcome, Daniel. What we know about the Chinese is that they sometimes stretch the truth. I mean, they've been growing at 10, 15% annually on a GDP basis since I can remember. So I think you're right. I think there's more here than meets the eye.
Yeah. But, volatility sometimes is our friend for long-term buyers. If you get an irrational market going down, not just up, sometimes it's a selling opportunity where you can take money because people have overpriced something relative to what the real value is of an asset. But conversely, you get this headline risk where something falls too much and it becomes a buying opportunity and you can pick it up. It's basically what we call dollar cost averaging, right?
Yeah, totally. And, I know you were just born in the 1990s, but I was actually managing money where I would go to these research conferences and they would talk about how many eyeballs eToys was getting, or ePets, whatever it was called. And what happened, of course, was that those companies couldn't monetize their websites, and so they stopped buying the products. So the question that I think investors rightly ask is AI, are these companies going to be able to monetize AI? And I think if you sit on the earnings calls like we do at our company, you hear the use cases popping up across sectors. So, Goldman has said, and Goldman's one of our 5 for 25, they've said, hey, we can utilize AI to draft 90% of fact check me on that, but it's something close to that, 90% of an IPO circular, legal documents, health, drug development, fraud detection at American Express. It's real. It's happening. As you know, we just bought a software at Laffer Tengler that combs the financial news sources. It's an AI software that combs the financial news sources so that we don't have to listen necessarily to every call or the entire call. We can read the summary and then go back and listen to what we want to listen to. Because I do think there's value in hearing the voice of management. But I just think this is way overblown and an opportunity for the people that missed the rally to get a little bit back. And then lastly, I want to know what you think about this. That supposedly DeepSeek was developed by a hedge fund in China that manages $8 billion. Is there any potential conflict there, do you think? Or
if it was our markets, yeah, someone could be going to jail. Like, you come out with this news, maybe you've traded on it already, maybe you've shorted the stock quite a bit, and lo and behold, this chat GPT killer comes out and everybody panics, and the logic behind the slide too. I mean, like, I could see a competitor's AI getting hit, but at the same time, why NVIDIA? Why the people that actually you have to have their chips to run your AI model?
Yeah, and they clearly did. I know. So I think it was a shot across the bow. I think it was in response to tariff rhetoric. I think and the Stargate announcement, because what could be more embarrassing than we're spending $500 million, but the Chinese only had spent $6 million, and it happened in a couple of months, as opposed to your Project Stargate that's going to take years.